Where can you get bottled water, canned milk, baby formula, perfume, pet food, and a good conspiracy? You guessed it. Follow me down the rabbit hole about the Nestle Company. Hi, friends, and welcome back to The Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Dani, as always, and today we actually have a really special conspiracy for you because this was actually a request from one of our listeners. So my friend Sam actually requested that we cover the Nestle Company today, and so that's where I'm at. I did not realize, I guess I had never heard any conspiracies about the Nestle Company, so I love to hear your guys' requests and to go down these rabbit holes for you, so that way you can just listen to them. If you've heard of one and you want me to cover it, please send it in. You can DM me on Instagram because I would love to cover your favorite conspiracies. So thank you, Sam, for requesting this, and I hope you guys all really enjoy it. This one, it's a doozy, man. It's big. So buckle up, Buttercup, because here we go. So the Nestle Company is actually the largest food company in the world with more than 2,000 brands under its belt. And honestly, I did not know this. I did not know how many companies were owned by Nestle. If you're confused about which companies, well, just go to our Instagram page. I posted this really cute little web, what are they, they're like little spider web diagrams. You know, you used to do it in elementary school to like plan your essay. Similar thing, has Nestle in the middle, and then it webs out to all the companies and brands that they own, which is a lot. There's a lot of them. I didn't know. So let's get into it. Nestle history. So Nestle did not start out as a shady company. Nestle started out like such a genuine thing. So you have this German man in 1866. This German man, his name was Henry Nestle, and he was developing this milk-based alternative to breast milk because he was concerned about the rate of infant mortality due to some mothers that just couldn't breastfeed, which is a issue. This is an issue, a serious issue that happens. We have formula now, but back in the 1800s, they did not have formula. So Mr. Nestle was like, I bet I could make, something where these moms could feed it to their babies and their babies could survive. So he basically combined milk and flour and sugar and made this formula. It was world's first formula. And he called it farine lactée. Farine lactée. And he made this, he was in Vevey, Switzerland. And this is a Switzerland-based company. So it's still based out of Switzerland. If you were ever curious about where Nestle is, it's in Switzerland. At the same time, though, and this is really important, because this is where Nestle started. So you have Henry Nestle, who developed this formula, this milk-based alternative to breast milk. But then you have the Page brothers, who are actually from the U.S., but they were in Cham, Switzerland. I think I'm saying that right. Cham. Cham, Switzerland, so just down the road from Vevey. And their company was called Anglo Swiss Condensed Milk Company, and you'll never guess what they made. They made condensed milk. So that milk you get in a can, that's from, this time period. And they weren't really rivals. They knew of each other. They were just kind of like, okay, you do your thing, I'll do my thing, not a big deal. In 1875, Nestle retired and sold his company to 3 local businessmen in Vevey. I'm saying it wrong. If you're from Switzerland, I'm so sorry. Anyway, you can write to me and tell me how to actually say that, but I still don't think I would get it if you wrote the same word. I don't know. Send me a voicemail. In 1877, Anglo Swiss started making milk-based baby food, and the Nestle company started making condensed milk. And this actually solidified their competition because at that point they were like, hey, I make that. Both of the companies were like, we're making that. So then they're both branching into each other's industries, which actually makes a lot of sense. You got milk-based formula and milk-based, or condensed milk in a can. It just makes sense. Anyway, in 1882, the Anglo-Swiss company expanded into the U.S., which makes sense because the Page brothers were from the U.S. originally. And then one of the Page brothers actually died. So this made room and made it possible for Nestle to actually expand into the U.S. So they didn't move in until around 1902. So somewhere between 1882 and 1902, in that 20-year gap, one of the Nestle brothers died. Nestle's like, cool. Or one of the Page brothers, died. Nestle just, slid into their DMs. I'm just kidding. They did not do that. They slid right into the U.S. In 1904, Nestle bought the rights and began selling chocolate for the first time. However, back in 1875, right when Nestle, like Henry Nestle, the man, was about to retire from the Nestle company and sell it to these Swiss businessmen, he actually sold some condensed milk to his neighbor Daniel Peter, and Peter used that milk to create milk chocolate. So it's only fitting that 30 years later, Nestle goes and buys the Peter company, and so now Nestle is starting to sell chocolate. And you might know Nestle for their Kit Kat bars, which are delicious, but by the end of this, you might not actually want to eat them anymore. We'll figure that out. But in 1905, so just a year later, the two companies actually merged. So the Page brothers, the Anglo-Swiss condensed milk company, and the Nestle company, which at this point had a different name. The names were all kind of weird and long, and so I just decided to call it the Nestle Company throughout this entire episode because it as the Nestle Company. If you want to know all the names of it, go back and research it. I don't think it makes that big of a difference here. So the Anglo-Swiss Company and the Nestle Company merged, and now they are the basis and the original company of Nestle, and Nestle owns this chocolate company, right? So now it's they've got sweetened condensed milk, they've got chocolate, and they've got baby formula. Cool. In 1927, it acquired rights to the cheesemakers Gerber and Company AG. So now they own a cheese company. Cool. In 1937, so 10 years later, Nestle Company invented instant coffee, and they called it Nescafe. And it's still around because everyone needs good instant coffee every now and then. We actually use it to make our Kahlua. We make homemade Kahlua around here, and it's a game changer for sure. Although, after this, I don't know if I can ever buy Nestle anything ever again. So, we're going to get into that. In 1947, the Nestle Company acquired a Swiss soup manufacturer. So now the company had baby food, condensed milk, and soup mixes and other related foods. The different mixes and stuff that this Swiss soup manufacturer made. In 1960, it acquired the company Cross and Blackwell, which actually makes sauces. I didn't know what Cross and Blackwell was, but it makes sauces for meats and such. The bottled water division of the company was created by purchasing other brands such as Vitel in 1987, Perrier in 1992, and San Pellegrino in 1998. The acquisitions of the food companies continued with Libby, McNeil and Libby, which I think are either similar or very close to the same, in 1970, the Stouffer Corporation 1973, the Carnation Company in 1985, Purina and Chef America, which is frozen foods, in 2002. Also in 2002, the ice cream businesses were all consolidated under the Breyers brand. In 2007, the company created Ovaltine and started selling Ovaltine. In 2010, they bought Kraft Foods frozen pizza business. So I don't think they own Kraft, but they own the frozen pizza part of Kraft now as their own. If you didn't also know, Nestle owns the Wonka brand. They also own Nespresso, which I was surprised about. I didn't know they owned Nespresso. They also, outside of food, they own L'Oreal, and so all the products that fall under the L'Oreal brand, which is Garnier and Maybelline, the Body Shop, which I didn't know, some perfumes like the Ralph Lauren perfume. Just everything. They just dabble in a little bit of everything because what company doesn't like money? I'm just saying. That's why people create companies. But that's not why we're here. Cool, Nestle owns a bunch of crap. Okay, we don't really care that much, except we do, right? Because now we're going to get into some of these scandals, and we're going to start with the most famous scandal, their baby formula scandal. So when you look up the boycott, the Nestle boycott, or like the controversy or whatever, you're going to find the baby formula one, and you're going to find one about bottled water. There are several. And we're going to go over the water, and we're going to go over the baby formula, but we're going to go over more than that too, because there's some weird stuff happening over at the Nestle Corporation. Let's start with this baby formula. So in the 1970s, Nestle wanted to create this need for baby formula. So from the creation of the company, that's always been like their bread and butter, right? They're like, cool, we do baby formula. We give babies food when their moms can't. Well, by the 1970s, their profits kind of started to like even out. They weren't really increasing anymore, and they're like, what the heck is happening? We need, more money. Who doesn't need more money? So what started out as like a life-saving alternative for babies whose moms couldn't breastfeed became a ploy for that more money. That makes sense. So a little bit about breastfeeding. So only about 1 out of 5 women can't breastfeed, although sometimes you just don't want to. And right now, I'm going to put this little disclaimer out here. I'm not here to shame anybody for breastfeeding or formula feeding. I formula feed my baby. I also breastfed him for a few months, and then my milk supply was gone. So now we formula feed. Formula is much more regulated than it was in the 1970s, than it was in 1866, when Henry Nestle himself created the first baby formula. It's much more regulated now, so it's safer for your children. This is in the 1970s, when there were no regulations for baby formula yet.
Did you know that over 40% of Americans have a hard time swallowing pills? So when it's time to take your vitamins, large capsules and pills are out of the question. We know that gummy vitamins exist, but they're full of sugar, they get stuck in your teeth, and they only contain a fraction of the nutrients you need. Luckily, Easy Melts has discovered the ultimate vitamin sweet spot. Vitamins that melt in your mouth, taste like a treat, and are packed with nutrients ready for absorption, all without an ounce of sugar. For a limited time, Easy Melts is giving listeners a free 3-month supply of vitamin D3 with their first purchase. To claim your free D3 vitamins, visit try.easymelts.com/spring24. That's melts.com/spring24. Say goodbye to the old way of taking your vitamins and say hello to the easy way. Menopausal and perimenopausal women, listen up. It's time to take control of your health and comfort, and Winona is here to help. Winona is a telemedicine company for menopause care who believes that your symptoms are real, important, and deserve to be taken seriously. And for many women, this starts with hormone replacement therapy. Winona's HRT is made with plant-based, bioidentical hormones rather than synthetic ones, so it better aligns with your body to offer relief from hot flashes, weight gain, and other uncomfortable symptoms. 80% of women who use Winona find relief within just 90 days. So, what are you waiting for? Get started today. Visit buywinona.com today to start your free visit. With free shipping and the ability to pause or cancel at any time, your path to wellness has zero obligations. Use code SPRING24 at buywinona.com for 25% off your first treatment plan. That's BYWINONA.com for 25% off. Winona, menopause care made easy.
So, in third world countries, Nestle, they hired saleswomen to dress as nurses and to walk around selling formula. They're basically like door-to-door salespeople, but in like third world countries. So I don't know if it's necessarily door-to-door or like hut-to-hut, like I don't know what their living situations were like, but these saleswomen dressed as nurses were going door-to-door, and they were paid fully on commissions. So they're like, hey, we really need to sell things so we can make some money. Everything in this world runs on money. Sad, but true. And at the time, like I said, the formula really wasn't regulated. And so it basically had no nutritious value. So as we know with breast milk, it comes with a lot of nutrients from the mom. And formula today, you can look on the back and it has all kinds of different vitamins and nutrients and different things that are really good for your baby to have, for your baby's development, for, brain growth. A lot of things happen in that first year that your baby needs. Well, in the 1970s, they were like, yeah, this water, flour, or this milk, flour, canola oil at the time, this is really doing it for us. So we're just going to keep doing this. Or they were doing milk, flour, canola oil in a powder form, and then you just add water to it to make it, drinkable for your baby, which is what you still do. But the nurses would put a spin on it, saying that formula was actually more nutritious than your breast milk. So they were just straight lying out their butts. And then they would hand out free samples to these women. They're like, hey, so it's better for your baby. You need it. You need it for your child. You're not giving your child what they need to grow. So they would hand out these free samples, and they were smart. They did some studies to find out, how long will it take a woman to dry out, to no longer produce breast milk, and they gave women that much free formula so that by the time they were done giving the formula to their babies, they no longer had breast milk to give to their babies. So they weren't producing anything anymore. Once a woman stops breastfeeding her baby, it is very hard to start doing it again. We do know now that you can start breastfeeding again, but back then, in the 70s, they didn't have the resources, they didn't have the information we have now. So, and especially in third world countries. So, one of the biggest problems that you find with this formula, first of all, is that there is actually no nutritious value in this at all. Also, formula has to be made with water. And in many third world countries, as we know, they don't have good, clean water. So, and these moms didn't know that they should boil the water before putting it in the formula for their babies. They just put it in there and gave it to their babies. So these babies were getting sick from this dirty water. They were getting bad diarrhea. They were, getting really sick. They're also super malnourished because there's no nutrients at all. Also, formula, as we all know, is way more expensive than breast milk. Excuse that howling. That is the wind outside my windows. I didn't realize it was that loud. Okay, so obviously formula is much more expensive. So women in third world countries really can't afford it. And so they would dilute the formula, or dilute it. So they would just, I don't know what it was back then. I just know for my formula right now. So right now, for every 2 ounces of water, you put 1 scoop of formula. So they would do 4 ounces of water and put 1 scoop of formula because they needed to make their formula last longer because they couldn't afford to buy it as frequently as they would need to if they were giving their baby a regular amount of formula, which I'm sure still happens actually today. And I really hope that that's not the case, but it can happen. So basically a combination of the bad water, the malnutrition, were causing babies to die. And The Baby Killer was a book that was released in the mid-70s, and it exposed Nestle. And the World Health Organization put in laws saying, you can't compare breast milk to formula. It's just not the same. And so Nestle was like, oh, we'll just move our operation to Southeast Asia where the laws aren't so strict and we can do whatever we want. So eventually, the FDA took over. And so if Nestle wants to sell their baby formula in America, it's such a heavily regulated industry now here that they have to meet certain criteria. Although back then they were just killing babies, which we will actually see is a theme throughout Nestle's history. But anyway, on to the next scandal. Thanks, Nestle, for the baby killing. That's really great, and that makes me really happy that I'm using formula. Although I don't use Nestle formula. I don't think it matters, but I don't use Nestle formula. Anyway, we're going to move on to some poisoning dogs, because why not kill dogs and babies all in one foul swoop? So in 2015, so this is a little newer, there was a lawsuit filed against Nestle and the Purina Pet Care. And this wasn't actually the first lawsuit that was filed against them. And I bet you it won't be the last. I would put money on it. So if anybody wants to take that bet, I'm gonna win it. I don't suggest betting me, but I'll take your money. The lawsuit stated that the Benefil dog food was full of toxins and causing dogs to get ill and in some cases die. So these toxins included like molds found in the grains in the food and none other than propylene glycol, which is actually one of the components found in antifreeze. And if you know anything about dogs, you're supposed to keep your dogs away from antifreeze because it kills them. So yeah, let's just go ahead and put it in dog food. That sounds really good. So the Benefil dog food, and Purina has other dog foods, but this type of their dog food is the one that this lawsuit was against. They were looking for like class action status. I'm not sure if they ever actually got it, but more than 3,000 complaints were made about this dog food making dogs sick. And Purina actually, they put out this statement, which I don't think helps their case in the slightest, but they put out the statement nonetheless. It says, quote, "We believe the lawsuit is baseless, and we intend to vigorously defend ourselves and our brand. Benefil had 2 previous class action suits filed in recent years with similar baseless allegations, and both were dismissed by the courts." I think they're dismissed by the courts because Nestle has a bunch of money, and they just like pay and pay and pay. So to that point, actually, another lawsuit at a different time was filed against the company over some jerky treats killing dogs and was settled. And the company actually created a fund of $6.5 million to compensate the pet owners who felt that their dogs were victims to the dog treats. So these treats were made in China. And at the time, the FDA claimed that more than 1,000 dogs had died from treats that were made in China. Not just like these treats, but treats in general that were made in China. And 4,800 complaints of illness and even 3 human complaints of illness were filed after ingesting these treats. I don't know why humans are ingesting dog treats, but 3 humans also got sick after eating the dog treats. And almost 5,000 dogs got sick, and 1,000 of them died. Those are big numbers. That's a lot. But of course, Purina tried to play it down, saying that their company was just targeted due to social media information or misinformation. Everyone tries to be like, oh, it's just a ploy on social media. They just want to use that excuse because they don't want to take the responsibility, which is something that you'll find over and over with every single one of these scandals that Nestle's a part of. So, cool. I think that this lawsuit is done, and I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure it was dismissed by the courts as well. So that would be 3 of these Benefil class action suits. And actually, I don't know if this one is technically a class action suit, but that's 3 of them that were dismissed. So, cool. They are just getting off scot-free, aren't they? Speaking of that, they also got away with murder. So if you're keeping track, Nestle has now killed babies, killed dogs, and now they're just going to kill grown people too. Man, what a good food company. I just can't take myself seriously. Okay, so in 2005, a union activist, Luciano Romero, was tortured and killed in Colombia. So he worked at the Nestle factory in Colombia, which was actually established in 1944, but this was in the late 90s is when he was working there. And this factory in Colombia is one of the biggest purchasers of milk in the country. And so, Colombia really likes it because it's, purchasing a lot of their milk and keeping their economy going. So in the 90s, Nestle was going to merge with another company, and Romero was super against it. He spoke out, which, dude, you're in Colombia. Don't speak out against anything ever. Because he was tortured and killed. But, spoiler alert. he actually started receiving death threats from these paramilitary groups in the area. And then during the merger, all the employees that worked at the factory, Romero being one of them, were fired and completely replaced with new workers with worse contracts because they want to save as much money as they can with cheap labor, and they want to then, I don't know, make as much money as they can, just doing things really crappy and killing people all the time. So Romero basically went into like what witness protection, it's not called witness protection there, but he was moved to Spain for a period of time, and then once the protection had like expired, he was required to go back to Colombia, and that was in 2005, and that is when he filed a complaint against the termination of his contract because he felt like he was unlawfully terminated, which I think makes a lot of sense. And he also was preparing to speak at a public witness hearing in Switzerland regarding the working conditions of the factory, but he never was able to testify because a paramilitary group actually captured him, tortured him, and killed him before the hearing. So that's just really good coincidence. I bet Nestle had nothing to do with that. Probably not. They definitely had nothing to do with that. Anyway, the paramilitary group was sentenced by the Colombian courts, but Nestle was never charged. And, I mean, it is super dangerous for union activists to speak out in countries like Colombia. And Nestle was just never held accountable for this murder because they definitely had nothing to do with it. They wanted this man to speak up against their company. So, yeah. If that's not enough reason to just love this company, I almost said country. It's just a company. They like to enslave children. Yep. So if you're keeping track, we've killed babies, we've killed dogs, we've killed full-grown men, and now we have child slaves. So Nestle, as with most companies, they get a lot of their chocolate grown in Africa because, they have really good grow conditions for chocolate there. So in 2000, it came out that Nestle and others were using farms that use child slave labor. I didn't name the other oh my gosh, I keep doing this. I didn't name the other companies because I thought that it wasn't important. I don't want to take away from the Nestle story, right? So Nestle promised to be completely, this is in quotes, blood cocoa free by the year 2005, but they missed that goal and basically every goal after that to be completely blood cocoa free. So what they mean by blood cocoa is like you're no longer using slave labor to get your chocolate needs. So in Africa, basically the children were either bought and enslaved or they were paid like next to nothing for their labor. And some of these kids that were in these like cocoa plantations, they were actually as young as 5, which breaks my heart because little 5-year-olds should be out playing and not enslaved making us Kit Kat bars. They didn't make our Kit Kat bars. They were just, harvesting the cocoa. Their solution was to gather cocoa from places that aren't using child slave labor and then use that chocolate for Kit Kat bars and put the fair trade label on it, which makes sense because Kit Kats are super popular. And if you're like, hey, I know the Nestle company makes this Kit Kat and it says fair trade on there, which they weren't lying about that. They actually got that chocolate, fair trade, but they did continue to use the blood cocoa for the rest of their chocolate. So, it was just a diversion. But of course they love diversions because the trends changed. So then everything went from like moral to environmental concerns, and they diverted the attention away from like the fair trade to having recycled wrappers. So on the wrapper of the candy bar, they would say, hey, this plastic is recycled. So then it made all the environmental people happy, and so all the like moral people were like, oh, we forgot that Nestle was using blood cocoa because now they're using recycled plastic for their wrapping paper on their Kit Kat bars, and we like that better. So basically they just went back to using the blood cocoa. But fun story about that, the plantations where they're actually getting their chocolate is directly related to the illegal cutting down of trees in Africa, which is leading to the decreased populations of elephants and chimps and other animals too. So, if you like your animals, don't buy Nestle chocolate. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. Do whatever makes you happy. I'm just here to give you the information. But, as we all know, it doesn't stop with chocolate. And it didn't stop with the union activists, and it didn't stop with the poison dog food, and it didn't stop with the baby formula, because now we're going on to the water problem. Flint, I'm looking at you. So in 2005, Nestle's CEO said it was, quote, extreme, unquote, to call water a human right, and it should have a market value and be privatized. So his views on things were that, like, it's a little extreme to be calling it a human right to have, like, clean water. So what Nestle likes to do is they like to go near a town that could use this good water. They buy up all the rights, they do whatever they need, and they just take all that water and leave those towns with, like, bad water and gross water and deadly water and things that would kill you. So tap water is relatively inexpensive. Nestle can buy a tank of water for like $10. Like, you think about those semi trucks with the tank and that filled it up, it's like $10. But they turn around, they bottle it, and they sell it off for $50,000. So that markup's a little out of there. That's a little crazy. But Nestle went into Pakistan and they started doing this where they divert the water, like the clean water, away from the towns that could use it or the cities or whatever. They divert it and they use it for their own personal profit margins. So they pump so much water out of Pakistan that the water levels have dropped hundreds of feet, and they are taking all the good water away and bottling it and leaving the locals with gross, deadly water. So, cool. So the Pakistanis are probably super happy with Nestle. But a little closer to home, we have Flint, Michigan. If you didn't know, Flint has a little bit of a water crisis going on up there. And it's not ideal. It kind of sucks. So basically, Nestle opened up shop like 2 hours away, which is not very far. And they are paying like $200 a year to pump hundreds of thousands of water bottles worth of water out of a nearby reserve. And every year they're just like pumping more. They're filling more bottles of water than all of Michigan can consume. And it makes sense because they're, selling it to the rest of the country too. And the government officials, basically what happened in Flint, the government officials decided they wanted to save some money and divert the city's water supply from Detroit to the Flint River. And the Flint River was like super like polluted and nasty and gross. And the residents actually pay some of the highest water bills in the country, which, like, their water is awful. Their water is giving lead poisoning to them. And they're paying like upwards of $200 a month. And Nestle pays $200 a year. So that's nice. Of course, Nestle wants to capitalize on this gross water. So they bottle the water a couple hours away and then they sell it back to the residents in Flint. Because why not profit off of a tragedy? The $200 the company pays isn't even actually for the water. It's for administration fees to the town and to the state. So thanks, Nestle. Thank you for that. That makes us all very happy. And I'm sure it makes the people in Flint, Michigan even more happy. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to keep my emotions out of it, but this episode kind of really pissed me off a little bit. So some other issues that are, I don't want to call them smaller, but they don't have as much information about them. So in 2008, Nestle actually put melamine in their milk in China to make it look like their milk had more protein than it did. And melamine is actually the compound that creates the plastic food containers, like in your kitchen, like your Tupperwares. That's melamine. And the FDA did some research to make sure that the melamine wouldn't soak into our food too much. Although there are a lot of people that look for like non-toxic options, so they don't have melamine in their plasticware or in their dishware at all. So like plates and bowls and stuff. They just don't want melamine because they don't want the option to get the melamine poisoning. Because being exposed to high levels of melamine can actually cause kidney problems, to include kidney stones and kidney failure. So let's go ahead and put it in milk because that's safe. This actually caused the hospitalization of about 300,000 infants, many of whom are believed to have died. So they really enjoy killing babies. Really enjoy it. In 2009, there was an E. coli outbreak in their cookie dough. A few years after that, there was lead found in their noodles because nobody is stopping this company. And Nestle actually has claimed that more than 60% of their food is not healthy, so you shouldn't eat it anyway. I'm just kidding. Eat whatever makes you happy. Who am I to tell you what to do? I eat a lot of what I shouldn't because it makes me happy, and I don't care what you have to say about it. There is one silver lining. I know. All this negative, but one good thing. The silver lining is I'm so sorry. I'm going to butcher her last name. I'm going to call her Dr. Yasmin through this whole thing because I can say her last name one time and it's not going to be good. Dr. Yasmin Motar-Jami. She was hired at Nestle as the Assistant VP for Global Food Safety. So her job is literally to make sure that the food is safe. That is a very important job at a food company. So in 2003, she was hired in the year 2000. In 2003, she started to raise alarms about the director of quality management allowing defective biscuits to stay on the shelf for years. And this was in France, Nestle France, despite many reports of infants choking. There are 40 cases that were actually reported about these defective biscuits, but Dr. Yasmin actually suspects that there are many, many more cases than just the 40 that were reported. She also found the same problem, but with like a different product that caused injury and death to several infants. Nestle's all about killing the babies. Instead of Nestle taking her seriously, they just ignored her. They were like, yeah, no thank you. She reported psychological harassment after coming forward with these issues. So she actually, and we're going to get into this, she wrote a public letter to the company. And in this letter, this is where she reported her psychological harassment. For years, she got harassed because she came forward saying like, hey, we got to stop killing people and allowing this to happen. We need to have better quality control. And the quality manager was like, we'll just leave defective biscuits on the shelves. After 3 years of this type of harassment, she was offered a position at the Nestle Research Center. And it wasn't really like we want to give you this new position. We think, you'd be really good for it. It was like, we are tired of you telling us that our food isn't safe, which is literally her job. They want to just shut her up. So she said, I would definitely take that job, even though it really wasn't a good move for her. She's like, yeah, I'll take the job if the food safety department performs a food safety audit, which, by the way, at this point, they hadn't performed in 10 years. So she was like, you perform the food safety audit and I will leave and I'll stop being in your hair about all this stuff. And they were like, she also asked to speak to the CEO directly. And they did not want that to happen. Nope. They shut her down. She never got to meet with the CEO. None of her concerns were ever even talked about. They all just like gave up on her. They're like, yeah, no, stop talking. Shut up. So then they fired her. They were super over it. They were done with her. I can't even believe that it took them 7 years after the initial complaint of the biscuits to fire her, because she wasn't fired until 2010. After being fired, she took Nestle to court for wrongful termination in 2011, and she won because good for her. Get it, girl. Anyway, she also wrote the public letter in 2017, and it was never answered by Nestle. And she was nominated for the 2020 Whistleblower of the Year award. So that's really cool. She is now an advocate for stronger whistleblower protections globally. And in fact, if you Google Nestle whistleblower, it pulls up a site, Nestle Speak Up, where you can submit your complaints to Nestle. And the reason they have this is because they want to control the narrative. If you submit your complaints, they'll be heard or they'll just be deleted, and you can never, like, they probably will reply to you and be like, we are really sorry that you feel this way. So that's as far as you're ever going to get. So will you keep eating Nestle after this episode? Will you go through and get rid of all your things? I don't know. Kit Kats are going to be hard to kick. We really like them in our house. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. I really appreciate the request, Sam. Thank you so much for requesting it. If you guys have any other requests, please DM me on my Instagram, and I will cover them, even if I don't like them, because I'm here for you. Until next week, my friends, stay skeptical, and I'll see you later. The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Dani Mercy. We thrive on listeners like you. If you like what you're hearing, please leave us a rating or review wherever you're listening. Follow us on Instagram at rabbit.holepodcast. Special thank you to Zakar Valaha Music for our intro.